very large city of Seattle, which has just elected a new mayor who it is not a completely unknown fact that she is the daughter of David Sloan Wilson, something that I would not have even thought to wonder about, but you called my attention to it. And
So who's an evolutionary biologist?
he is an evolutionary biologist. I will say I know him slightly. We have not met in person, but we've had several conversations. I actually quite like David Sloan Wilson, and I think there's an element of his work that is exceptionally good. But he's most famous for his revival of a concept called group selection based on the idea that altruism pays in a much more general sense than evolutionary biologists typically believe. And in that context, it is fascinating that his daughter has become the mayor of Seattle and seems to have picked up the same misunderstanding, which is now being manifest in policy. Now,
This may not be fair, but you know how using a bad understanding of evolution to justify eugenics became known as scientific racism? This is like scientific socialism.
yeah, you're right. You're
Using we think, a mistaken understanding of evolution and how things work to justify policies that are batshit crazy.
All right. So I'm going to spend 3 minutes and explain what the connection is, because people are bound to find this a little mysterious. Once upon a time, there was an idea in evolutionary biology called group selection, most famously associated with a biologist named Wynne Edwards. The idea starts out with a correct observation. The correct observation is that if you take two groups, let's say that they're people, you take two groups of people that are similar, but for one characteristic. One of the groups is altruistic within the group with the other members, and the other group is fractious and fights within the members. And you put them in competition. The group that is altruistic, in which everybody collaborates and doesn't think about their own take, that group outcompetes the fractious group every time. That much is true. But the idea that therefore we should expect to see altruism break out, that groups that are being altruistic should be favored everywhere, and so it should be a very common observation, that was debunked. I hate using that word, but that was debunked by a group of very insightful biologists in the mid-20th century, mid to late 20th century, including Bill Hamilton, Bob Trivers, all the greats participated in this, George Williams. And their argument was, yes, a group of altruists outcompetes a group of selfish individuals, but the problem is the individual within the group of altruists who is at greatest advantage is the selfish individual, that a cheater who takes advantage of the altruism of the other members of his group but does not contribute by being altruistic himself is the most successful within the group of altruists. So every group of altruists is torn apart by basically cheaters, right? It's a collective action.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, right.
Sounds like humans.
Exactly.
Sounds like life on Earth.
It sounds like life on Earth, and it is exactly the misunderstanding of socialists who expect this we all pull together and come out ahead ideology to work, and it doesn't, because in the end, the mistake is always the same. Socialism and communism punish those who are productive and reward those who are lazy, and that is unstable. It is exactly this misunderstanding that undergirds socialism and communism. And it is interesting to watch the academic version of this misunderstanding flow down a lineage, to the now mayor of Seattle, who is apparently confused in this very way. So here, let's take a look at this brief clip of her recently. And before we go to the clip, let me just say, she is the mayor of Seattle. She is not in charge of tax policy in the state. She is simply responding to what has been done by other people in her party. So we cannot hold her responsible for the bad policy.
So, right, as we've talked about on DarkHorse before, The so-called millionaire's tax has just been passed by the state legislature and signed by Governor Ferguson, which is something 20-something attempt to pass an income tax in the state of Washington over and over and over again, overturned by the voters. This time not overturnable due to more sleights of hand and ridiculous nefarious behavior by the lawmakers. So now, for the first time, Washington State has an income tax. Oh, but it only affects people making $1 million or more. Oh, it's not people, it's couples making $1 million or more. Oh, let's immediately consider whether or not we should drop that to $125,000 or more. And everyone grants that just because this is currently a tax restricted to the wealthy does not in any way suggest that it will continue to be restricted to the wealthy.
All right. In fact, the game theory is going to require it to be extended for reasons that we'll talk about here in a second. But let's hear from Katie Wilson.
I think the claims that millionaires are going to leave our state are like super overblown, and if the ones that leave, like, bye.
So first of all, she does the thing where it's like, the thing you're saying isn't true, and also, if it is, it's great.
Yeah.
Like, she has both of those positions at the same time. Also, she doesn't quite do it. I thought the first time I heard that she did that crazy millennial vocal fry thing, like, bye, which is, very, very aggravating to everyone who doesn't do that. And it does seem like she's sort of just appealing to exactly, well, gosh, I can't even think of all the people who have pointed out that financially upwardly mobile, highly educated single women, childless single women, are looking to the state to take care of them, absent something else in their life that will. And so there's an appeal here to that, those who would use vocal fry to affect social change.
Yes. Well, and the audience's reaction there was fascinating to me because initially they realized that she said something that isn't good. Like, she's like, oh, millionaires are leaving? Bye. And the audience is like, huh? And then they're like, okay, we're going to get on board with this. And they start, they slowly arrive at hooting and clapping. And, so, okay, on the one hand, you think the state should be, taking care of you. And on the other hand, you're like sneering at the so-called millionaires as they walk out the door. And that is how the spiral is going to go, because you're driving out the people who,
who are taxable, who have money to, I want to say to offer, who have money to steal. and there's not going to, you're going to have to start dropping the number, the amount of income a person has to make before you start taking their money from them.
Right.
Because there is not going to be enough of a tax base, and go on.
Right. But I mean, that's just it. Is like the game theory is very clear. On the one hand, she says, oh, they're not going to leave. Well, they already are leaving. There's a freaking glut of houses on the market. They're leaving because they can, and because you've made it clear that you're going to enter into the spiral. So there's actually now a kind of race to get out of the state before they start,
Well, and that's, we are going to talk more about Washington, including next week. But I will say that the objection here is not actually to the idea of an income tax, right? Nope. Let's talk about Idaho. Idaho has a stable, flat income tax. If I may be right, it's like 5.2 or 5.3% at this point. It was 5.7 or so percent. And they realized they had more money than they needed. And so they dropped it a little bit because it's not the state's purview to take money that they don't need from people who have earned that money. And that is, that doesn't sound unreasonable to me. The fact is, in Washington state, the goalposts are moving constantly, and they're pretending they're not even playing a game. New estate tax, new capital gains tax, new income tax, changing property taxes that are hard to interpret, changing business taxes, different kinds of sin taxes. Like the landscape is impossible to predict. You know they're not on your team, no matter who you are, actually. Like, some people may think that the legislators are on your team, but they're clearly not. And it's completely impossible to just be like, okay, you know what? I live in a place with great services. No, I live in a place with some services, and I know what I'm going to have to pay, so I can plan. I can try to grow my business. I can try to put away a nest egg in order to buy a house, in order to save for retirement for my kids' college. You can't in a landscape where clearly the people who are making policy are going to just make things up differently every year they come back into session.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has become an obvious scam.
Yeah.
The fact is, the incredibly high tax burden and the incredibly cruddy services have to be viewed at the same time. This is, what you're looking at with politicians who, whatever they say, no matter how crazy it is, the farther left this is my right, but it's their left, arguably. The farther left the thing that is said, the louder the cheers, right? Well, okay, now in order to fleece you, all you have to do is disguise it as a compassionate policy, and people will feel obligated to cheer for it. And this is what you get. You get a state that is signing its own death warrant, right? It is creating, Starbucks is apparently considering a move to Tennessee. Starbucks, which is...
They have opened up offices in Tennessee, have hired... I think I heard something like 2,000 people. They still claim they're not leaving Washington, but a lot of people don't believe them.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. They're moving some large fraction of their operations out of the state of Washington. Boeing already did it. Amazon already did it. We're driving out the major employers with punitive taxation. Bye. Yeah, exactly. And the point is, what do you think is going to happen next? Either the state's going to collapse because it's not going to tax the people who remain, or it's going to tax the people who remain. Neither of those are any
we
good.
can have both.
Well, right. It'll be both.
Yeah.
And the jaw-dropping frauds and incompetence
We'll talk about that next
will continue. To be continued.
Yeah.